They never plan to find each other, but somehow they always do. The avoidant who fears being needed too deeply, and the anxious who fears being left before they're ready. Two nervous systems shaped by opposite kinds of insecurity, drawn together by a chemistry neither can fully explain. One retreats to feel safe. One reaches out to feel secure. And each interprets the other's instinct as proof of their oldest fear. It looks like a tragic mismatch, but underneath, it's a perfectly synchronized emotional pattern. A cycle built from childhood, attachment, and the quiet ways we try to protect ourselves. This is why they collide, and why they can't seem to let go. Before either person knows what's happening, something in their bodies recognizes each other, not consciously, not logically, but in a way that feels strangely familiar, like a pattern they've lived before. For the avoidant partner, the anxious person's warmth feels flattering at first. Someone finally appreciates their independence, their competence, their calm exterior. The anxious partner leads with openness, enthusiasm, emotional presence, qualities the avoidant secretly admires, but rarely allows themselves to express. To them, this feels like connection without pressure, attention without demand. For the anxious partner, the avoidant's steadiness feels grounding, their quiet strength, their self-sufficiency, their composed demeanor, it all feels like safety. They interpret that calm as emotional maturity, reliability, and depth. The avoidant seems stable in the exact way the anxious partner has always longed for. Their distance isn't yet visible. Their independence feels like confidence, not withdrawal. This is the first layer of the chemistry. Each person mistakes the other's protective strategy for the thing they desperately need. The anxious partner sees emotional security. The avoidant sees emotional acceptance. And because both carry wounds they've never fully named, the dynamic feels powerful not because it's right, but because it's familiar. There is also a subconscious emotional math happening beneath the surface. The avoidant finds someone who won't push too quickly at first. The anxious finds someone who won't overwhelm them with emotional chaos. It feels balanced, harmonious, predictable, but underneath that harmony is a deeper truth. Their nervous systems are matching, not their needs. Both are operating from fear, the fear of losing connection, and the fear of being consumed by it. This is the invisible magnetism. Two people who learned opposite ways of coping with emotional uncertainty, fitting together like puzzle pieces. Not because they are compatible, but because their wounds are. This invisible recognition is what pulls them together. It feels like destiny. But it's really the beginning of a cycle neither of them sees coming. To understand the avoidant partner, you have to understand one thing first. Distance is not rejection, it is regulation. Avoidant people learned early in life that emotional closeness came with pressure, overwhelm, or inconsistency. Their nervous system adapted by becoming self-contained, self-reliant, hyper-independent. They discovered that needing less meant hurting less. So when someone gets close, their mind doesn't register connection, it registers risk. The avoidant partner isn't trying to punish, confuse, or manipulate. They're trying to stay emotionally safe in the only way they've ever known. Creating space helps them breathe. It helps them think clearly. It helps them avoid the old fear that intimacy will cost them their freedom, stability, or sense of control. Beneath their calm exterior is a quiet, constant anxiety, not about being abandoned, but about being emotionally swallowed. They fear becoming responsible for another person's emotional world. They fear disappointing someone who depends on them. They fear failing at vulnerability. So they withdraw in small ways. A slower reply. A subtle shift in tone, a growing need for alone time, a sudden preoccupation with work, hobbies, or routines. To the avoidant, these are grounding strategies, ways to restore equilibrium and emotional clarity. To the anxious partner, they feel like rejection. But the avoidant isn't running from the anxious person. They're running from the discomfort of being fully seen, being needed, being emotionally required in ways they were never taught to navigate. And ironically, the more the anxious partner reaches for reassurance, the more the avoidant partner feels pressured, triggering an instinctive retreat. Avoidants don't dislike love. They don't fear relationships. They fear losing themselves inside one. Their distance is not a lack of care. It is the only form of emotional safety their nervous system trusts. And until someone understands that, every step closer will feel like a threat. Every expression of need will feel like weight. Every moment of intimacy will feel like a test they're destined to fail. This is the avoidant's hidden world, the quiet struggle they rarely put into words, even as the cycle begins to unfold. If the avoidant protects themselves with distance, the anxious partner protects themselves with closeness. For someone with an anxious attachment style, emotional connection is not a preference, it is a form of safety. It is how their nervous system stays regulated. It is how they feel secure, grounded, and emotionally stable. Growing up, they often experienced love that was inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes present, sometimes unpredictable. Their mind learned to stay alert, to pay attention to every shift, every pause, every change in tone, not out of drama, but out of survival. So when someone they care about pulls away, their body reacts before their mind can explain it. A tightening in the chest, a rush of worry, a sense of urgency, a fear that something has gone wrong. To the anxious partner, closeness is emotional clarity. It's how they know the relationship is safe. It's how they confirm they haven't done something wrong. It's how they quiet the spiral of, what if I'm being abandoned again? Their pursuit isn't neediness, it's regulation. It's their attempt to restore emotional balance. This is why the avoidance distance feels so destabilizing. The anxious partner interprets it as disinterest, as rejection, as a sign that love is slipping away the way it once did. And because of this, they move closer. A check-in text, a request for reassurance, a need for more clarity or communication, not to control the avoidant, but to calm their own nervous system. Yet every step they take toward reassurance creates the pressure the avoidant fears most. And every inch of distance the avoidant creates inflames the anxious partner's deepest insecurity. Two people, each trying to feel emotionally safe, accidentally triggering each other's oldest wounds. The anxious partner doesn't want to cling. They want to connect. They want stability, honesty, emotional presence, and partnership. But they haven't yet learned that closeness built from fear will always feel fragile. And until they feel internally secure, every small emotional shift will feel like a threat even when the relationship isn't ending. This is the anxious partner's quiet world, a heart that feels danger where there is silence, and safety where there is closeness. Once the initial chemistry settles, the real pattern begins a quiet, predictable dance that neither partner consciously chooses, yet both fall into with startling precision. It usually starts with something small, a delayed reply, a shift in tone, a moment where the avoidant's internal too close alarm quietly activates. To the avoidant, this shift is subtle. They simply need air, space, a moment to regulate and feel like themselves again. They don't see it as distance, they see it as balance. To the anxious partner, it feels entirely different. That tiny shift triggers their oldest fear. I'm losing them. Their body interprets the moment as a threat to emotional safety. So they reach out a little more than before. The anxious partner pursues connection. The avoidant partner withdraws for emotional space. The distance makes the anxious partner panic. The panic makes the avoidant retreat further. What begins as a microscopic emotional adjustment becomes a full cycle. First pursuit, next withdrawal, then anxiety, then retreat, next panic, and lastly, shutdown. Both feel misunderstood. Both feel overwhelmed. Both feel like the other person is creating the very dynamic they fear. The avoidant thinks, "Why am I being pressured? Why can't I be myself?" The anxious thinks, "Why am I being pushed away? What did I do wrong?" Neither sees that they are reacting to the other person's protective strategy, not their true intentions. This cycle has a rhythm. Pursuer seeks reassurance to feel emotionally grounded. Withdrawer seeks distance to feel emotionally regulated. The more one leans in, the more the other pulls back. The more one pulls back, the more the other clings. And because both partners are trying to stabilize themselves, the cycle becomes self-reinforcing. The avoidant mistakes pursuit for pressure. The anxious mistakes distance for abandonment. Each misreads the other's behavior through the lens of their own fear. This is why the dynamic feels so intense, so consuming, so hard to step out of. Not because the connection is toxic, but because their survival strategies collide in perfect, painful symmetry. The cycle doesn't continue because they don't care. It continues because they're both trying to feel safe in opposite ways. What's most surprising about the avoidant-anxious dynamic is not that it begins so easily, but that it repeats itself in every relationship stage. Dating, commitment, conflict, distance, reconciliation, the pattern always finds a way back. Not because either person wants the cycle, but because their nervous systems recognize each other long before their minds do. In the early stages of dating, the avoidant is drawn to the anxious partner's openness. It feels flattering to be wanted so deeply. It feels safe to be with someone who takes emotional initiative. The anxious person provides warmth the avoidant rarely expresses but secretly craves. The anxious partner, meanwhile, is captivated by the avoidant's steadiness. Their self-reliance feels like emotional gravity. Their calm feels like reliability. The anxious partner mistakes the avoidant's independence for emotional maturity. But as the relationship continues, familiarity takes over. Patterns become clearer. Old wounds surface in quiet ways. The avoidant starts to feel the weight of expectation, even if the anxious partner hasn't asked for anything. The anxious partner senses small moments of distance, even if the avoidant hasn't withdrawn yet. Both are reading subtle cues shaped by years of emotional conditioning, and in conflict, their instincts amplify. The avoidant shuts down to feel stable. The anxious escalates to feel reassured. The more the avoidant manages their discomfort through distance, the more the anxious partner manages their fear through closeness. Even breakups rarely end the pattern. Avoidants often return when the pressure has eased. Anxious partners often reopen the door because the reconnection feels like validation. It's not that they're addicted to each other. They're addicted to the emotional resolution they keep chasing. The avoidant wants closeness without losing independence. The anxious wants love without feeling abandoned. And each believes, even unconsciously, that the other person might finally give them what they've always wanted. The anxious hopes the avoidant will choose them fully. The avoidant hopes the anxious will accept their emotional limits. This hope is powerful. It's what keeps them circling back. It's what keeps them believing, trying, reaching, even when the cycle hurts. They aren't just drawn to each other once. They're drawn to the possibility of healing the wound the other mirrors back. At the core of the avoidant-anxious dynamic is a quiet truth. Both partners are trying to solve an emotional equation that never quite adds up. Not because they're incompatible, but because they're trying to meet needs they've never learned to express. The anxious partner is looking for reassurance. Not endless attention, just emotional clarity. They want to know, are you here? Do you care? Am I safe with you? When they move closer, it's not to control, it's to stabilize. It's how they regulate fear. Their pursuit is an attempt to bring emotional alignment back into place. The avoidant partner is looking for autonomy. Not avoidance, just internal balance. They want to feel, I can be myself. I won't be overwhelmed. Love won't consume me. When they retreat, it's not to punish, it's to breathe. It's how they regulate overwhelm. Their distance is an attempt to restore equilibrium, not to create pain. So one reaches for closeness, to feel secure. The other reaches for space, to feel safe. Two opposite strategies, both designed for emotional protection, collide in a way that feels deeply personal, even though it isn't. Their emotional math looks like this. The anxious partner believes closeness equals connection. The avoidant partner believes distance equals clarity. Each expects the other to understand their logic intuitively. Each is hurt when the other doesn't. And beneath it all, both share the same hidden need: emotional stability. The anxious partner tries to create stability through togetherness. The avoidant partner tries to create stability through independence. Both are seeking a version of safety they never fully received. This is why the dynamic feels so intense. The anxious partner isn't really asking for constant reassurance. They're asking for consistency. The avoidant partner isn't really asking for endless space. They're asking for emotional safety without losing themselves. Both are negotiating with ghosts from their childhood. Old fears, old patterns, old strategies for survival. The tragedy is that they misunderstand each other, not because they're opposites, but because they're mirrors. Each reveals the other's unfinished emotional story. Their math isn't broken, it's incomplete. And until they understand what they're truly seeking, they'll keep solving the wrong equation. The avoidant anxious cycle feels powerful because it runs on instinct, not intention. But the moment even one person becomes aware of the pattern, the entire dynamic can shift. This isn't about fixing each other, it's about understanding the emotional choreography so deeply that the dance no longer controls you. For the anxious partner, the path forward begins with internal grounding, not suppression, not pretending not to care, but learning how to soothe the fear that connection is fragile. Because when your sense of safety comes from within, every moment of distance stops feeling like danger. You communicate needs with clarity instead of panic. You stop chasing reassurance and begin offering self-assurance. And that change alone softens the avoidance instinct to retreat. For the avoidant partner, the shift begins with staying present through discomfort. Not forcing closeness, not abandoning independence, but learning that emotional presence doesn't equal losing yourself. When you practice sharing small emotions, a worry, a preference, a fear, your nervous system discovers that vulnerability doesn't erase autonomy. And those tiny moments of openness create the stability the anxious partner has always been seeking. Together, the dynamic changes when both partners learn a new rhythm. When the anxious partner pauses before pursuing, when the avoidant partner stays before withdrawing, when both speak from emotional clarity instead of fear, when needs aren't treated as demands and space isn't treated as rejection, the cycle softens, the room expands, the relationship becomes a place of co-regulation instead of collision. But even if the relationship doesn't last, the awareness you gain always does. Because breaking the pattern isn't about keeping the other person, it's about reclaiming yourself. It's learning that your fear is not your identity. Your coping style is not your destiny. And your attachment pattern is not a limitation, it's a roadmap. Once you see the dance clearly, you don't fall into it unconsciously. You choose differently, walk differently, love differently, and the dynamics that once felt inevitable stop feeling like fate. In the end, avoidant and anxious partners aren't opposites. They're two people carrying different kinds of fear, hoping the other might finally make them feel safe. But healing doesn't happen through someone else. It happens in the quiet moments, when you recognize your patterns, when you understand your reactions, when you learn to meet yourself with compassion instead of judgment. Because once you see your attachment style clearly, you stop confusing fear for love and emotional intensity for emotional intimacy. You begin choosing partners who feel steady instead of familiar. You begin creating love from awareness instead of survival. And the patterns that once defined you become patterns you outgrow, gently and for good.